Good evening and good morning in China. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have some wonderful speakers here with you today for our second dialogue in our webinar series, Nature-Based Solutions Embedded in Subnational Policies. My name is Ashley Conrad Seda. I'm a research affiliate and policy lead with the California-China Climate Institute at UC Berkeley. Tonight and this morning, we are joined by three wonderful speakers: Ken Alex, Director of Project Climate at Berkeley Law; Dr. Huang Xiaoping, Deputy Director General in Beijing Municipal Bureau of Forestry and Parks; and Jenny Lester Moffitt, Undersecretary at the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Before I turn it over to them, I wanted to just go through a few items of housekeeping to make sure that we all know what's happening. Tonight's and this morning's webinar will last approximately 1 hour. If you have any questions for our speakers, please enter them in the Q&A area on your screen at any time, and we'll do our best to answer them live. And this dialogue is being recorded and will be available on the ccci.berkeley.edu website after this event. So I would just like to thank you again for joining us. We're so pleased that you're here, and we're really looking forward to this excellent dialogue where we can share our best practices and great ideas for embedding nature-based solutions in all of our climate policies. So first, I'll turn to Ken Alex for him to give us an opening statement and some general framing for our discussion today. Thanks, Ken.
All right. Thank you, Ashley, and thanks to everybody for being with us this morning and evening. And now I just see my big fat face on the screen, so I'm changing the view. It's really hard to get used to Zoom, but mostly I want to say how pleased I am that the California-China Climate Institute is having this webinar and also its focus on nature-based solutions. I have to admit that I'm a bit obsessed with the topic. I was the director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research under Governor Jerry Brown, and a lot of the focus of that particular office was on land use and nature-based solutions. I was a very big proponent and continue to be of really embracing that set of solutions and getting them into climate plans in California and beyond. But to be blunt, while we're making progress, we are not doing particularly well overall on nature-based solutions in California so far. Working in natural lands clearly should be carbon sinks. We should be sequestering carbon at a high rate in working in natural lands, but instead, now they are large sources of emission. Of course, a lot of that is because of the massive fires in the state of California. Fires release CO2, black carbon, they generate bad air quality, and of course, they destroy large swaths of forests. And in California and China are the two places that the sequoia redwoods continue to exist. So no small set of things at risk here. The fires have not only generated greenhouse gas emissions, but they've changed the landscape. It's amazing to see in California over just a few years how dramatically different the Sierras are. I've lived in California almost all my life. And so I have a 60-year horizon here to see some of these changes, and it's dramatic. So we need to make some changes. On agricultural land, we use large amounts of fertilizer. We generate huge emissions of methane from things like contained animal feeding operations, CAFOs. And we've reduced the carbon carrying capacity of much of our agricultural soils. In addition, we're converting prime agricultural farmland, particularly near some of our cities, at a pretty high rate. And that conversion into development generates even more GHG emissions from the developed land. So Now I can turn and say there's some very good news, however. And in fact, I think there is. There are many encouraging nature-based solutions. And I would say California is moving and leading on quite a few of them. Urban forestry is, I think, getting a new look. I think there's a significant greater interest in investment in urban forestry. It not only produces carbon sink and sequesters carbon, but it reduces heat island effect, it improves neighborhoods, and there's a particular focus now in California on disadvantaged communities. It's amazing if you do an overlay of disadvantaged communities in California with the absence of tree cover, it's almost identical. And so I think there's a real sense that we need to change that and change how we integrate urban forestry into disadvantaged communities. California is making a huge investment really in improving forest and fire management. The governor has $1 billion for it in his budget this year. There's a real effort to reduce catastrophic fires. Research and policy action is, of course, essential. And over the next few years, I expect quite a fair amount of action on this. There are multiple policies. There's an executive order in which Governor Newsom has identified that by 2030, we want to protect 30% of California's land as open. There's a forest carbon plan, there's wildfire and forest resilience plan, there's a series of initiatives that are moving forward and certainly make me hopeful. Things like restoration of wetlands are moving forward that not only increases carbon sequestration, but improves habitat and biodiversity. And where it's saltwater wetlands, it also reduces localized acidification. So very important. In agriculture, quite a few initiatives. I'm sure Jenny will talk about a number of them. Promoting healthy soils, carbon sequestration in soils, investing in preservation of agricultural lands near cities, adding compost to rangeland, instituting regenerative ag techniques more broadly across the state, and reducing methane emissions through multiple areas of agricultural production, including with dairy digesters and working on changing the diets of cattle. Clearly, we need to accelerate these actions. We need to incorporate them into our climate plans locally, in the state, nationally, internationally. We need to ensure that nature-based solutions are a central part of our overall climate strategies. California and China have a great deal to learn from each other, and I've seen that in the opportunities that I've had to go to China and to learn from our counterparts. So I'm very pleased, as I said, that CCCI is promoting joint efforts and research. And let me just give briefly a few examples of some of the things that we're working on at Berkeley. First, strategies to reduce methane emissions from agriculture, I've mentioned. We're really interested in developing a protocol that would allow not just California, but would build on California's experience, China, jurisdictions around the world. There are many different aspects of methane emission from agriculture, and we're interested in building out a protocol that jurisdictions can use as a resource. We're working on determining how to measure carbon sequestration in farmland. That turns out to be no small problem. It's actually quite difficult to measure sequestration in soil over time, particularly across multiple acres. So we're working on that. We've developed what's some of you will know the term AmeriCorps program, something called Grizzly Corps here at UC Berkeley. It sends recent college graduates to work in farm and forest communities on carbon sequestration issues. And we're expanding that program, and perhaps one day we'll go international with it. We're creating funding mechanisms to promote better practices, particularly around regenerative agriculture. And then the final thing I'll mention is the use of technology like satellites, low orbit satellites, and remote sensoring to really increase the ability to monitor how we're doing around things like soil sequestration and making progress on carbon and turning natural and working lands into sinks that they need to be. So what I really just want to end by saying, that these nature-based solutions really have tremendous potential for carbon sequestration in California, in China, and worldwide. And I'm very pleased to see CCCI helping and leading that effort. So thank you very much for being able to join the dialogue today. And I guess, Ashley, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ken. And it's so great to hear all the work that you're still working on. And it's really nice to know that you're still leading and engaging in this space and that we get to work together occasionally. So we'll turn now to introductions by our esteemed colleagues. And once they give a few introductions with slides, we'll go into a guided discussion with some questions from me and questions from the audience. So first, I would like to turn to Dr. Huang Xiaoping. He's responsible for ecological restoration, agroforestry, science and technology innovation as the Deputy Director General of the Beijing Municipal Bureau of Forestry and Parks. And after that, we'll turn to Jenny Lester Moffitt, Undersecretary at California Department of Food and Agriculture. Importantly, Jenny is a fifth-generation California farmer. I've actually visited her family's walnut farm, and it's amazing. And she has been Undersecretary since January 2015. So, sorry, she has been with Food and Ag since 2015. She works to engage stakeholders on issues that affect ranchers and farmers, including climate change, land use, water policy, and food security. So first we will start with Dr. Huang, and then we will move over to Undersecretary Moffitt. Thank you so much.
Beijing, and it is really my really good pleasure to see you via screen, and it is also my pleasure to share with you about the experience and practice of NBS in Beijing. Before I start my presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Dong Ke for her excellent work. Without her help, we could not realize this meeting. So, I work for Beijing Municipal Bureau of Forest and Parks. So I just give briefly a little bit about the institute I work on. So the Beijing Municipal Bureau of Forest Parks, on behalf of Beijing Municipality, responsible for forest land, wetlands, and green space in urban area, and biodiversity. In terms of policy, regulations, and local law setting, and also promotes participation of Beijing citizens. So under Beijing Municipal Bureau of Forest Parks, there is special sector, which is called Beijing Forest Carbon Administration. This sector responsible for climate change. Combating climate change via under this administration, and so it started from officially from 10 years ago, and Beijing so nature-based solution has been prioritized in Beijing overall master plan, which issued in 2016. So relevant data has been issued. For example, forest coverage will be 45%, and green space in urban area also will be expanded. So per capita green space will reach 17 square meter, and also this what do we call the and also let me find my so this is our so all our developments of nature-based solution is just based on, sorry, I just found my PPT. So based on this overall plan, so the whole society has reached consensus leading on this master plan to develop whole city of Beijing. So you can notice this indicators of development has been listed in this master plan. And this is Beijing. Now, when people talk about Beijing, Beijing is not only a city. Beijing is a metropolitan, but Beijing is a region. In northern and western part of Beijing is a mountainous area, which accounts for 65% of the total area of Beijing. This mountainous area covered mainly by forests, by trees, mainly plantations and secondary forest. It plays an important role for drinking water protection, water source protection. As you know, Beijing, the drinking water of Beijing mainly depend on this surface water. And also it's plays role of carbon sequestration, this forest. Also provides a job opportunity for local people. In mountainous area, 10% of the total population of Beijing lived in this area, about 2 million people. So they have to live depend on this forest. But thanks to our successful eco compensation scheme or system, so this traditional farmer, most of them to become forest warden. So so government pay for their work on forest management, fire protection, pest control, and also provide services for visitors from urban area. So in urban, and so we Beijing also is called Southern Park City. So in Beijing we have more than 1,000 parks. So these parks, the green space in urban area also plays very important. For example, could reduce hot island effect. So as Beijing is extremely hot in summertime, and also is a recreational activities which have a strong demand for Beijing people. And also the neighboring Beijing is a Hebei province, and so also provide ecological shelter for Beijing. So thanks to our compensation, eco compensation scheme, every year Beijing government pay a lot of money to neighboring province, Hebei province, for the providing clean drinking water, fresh air, identification, combating, etc. Also, in Beijing, People's Congress passed a regulation or local law that every citizen must plant 3 to 5 trees every year. So this provides platform for all citizens have a chance to participate nature-based activities, plant trees, manage their parks, and manage our forests, protect birds, habitat of birds. And birds in Beijing, we have very successful indicator for nature-based solution. Our recorded number of birds has reached 505 species, which we are happy about that. So this is the whole picture of that. But with the developments of Beijing, more and more people would like to spend their holiday and weekend in nature. So new industry has developed and more strongly. For example, nature education industry, nature recreational industry, and what we call the forest therapy industry have a more strong demand for Beijing. So this is, next year, actually less than 1 year, the Winter Olympics will be held in Beijing. So we committed this Winter Olympics will be a low carbon or carbon neutral event through forestry, plant trees, through low carbon transportation, and low carbon venues, buildings, and etc. So with Beijing's experience and could be shared with neighboring provinces, also will be adapted by central governments. So we work together to help China to fulfill its commitments, which is peaking carbon before 2030 and realize carbon neutrality before 2060. So this is our what we have done so far. And of course, we have a lot of things to do. For example, enhance the whole society or citizens participate nature-based solution, and so to put nature-based solution from regional level to national level, and we have a lot of things to do. So I think we have a lot of things to work together. So thank you. This is my experience and Beijing experience about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang. That was really wonderful and so amazing to hear about the rise of bird species, and what a great way to count and ensure that you're seeing success with your intervention. So thank you so much. Those pictures were really beautiful. So Jenny, we will turn to you now and hear your overview, and then we'll go into questions. And remember, folks, you can jump in on the Q&A if you have specific questions, just so we can follow up with anything you're hearing. Thanks, Jenny.
Great, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here today, this evening here in California and in the morning in China. So it's great to learn from you and in China about the work that's being done, and definitely a lot of opportunity for synergy. I'm going to, Ken talked a lot about what we're doing in California on climate smart agriculture. I'm going to really focus my conversation on healthy soils. If I can get there we go, on healthy soils and the work that we're doing on the Healthy Soils Initiative in the state. I always like to first start off with just a little bit of a snapshot about California agriculture. One thing I will say though is California is a state, we have really easy math, thank goodness. We have 100 acres or 100 million acres in the state of California. And of that 100 million acres in California, over 90% is in what we call our natural and working lands. So lands that are in forestry or in wetlands, in rangeland and grasslands and shrubland, and the list goes on for sure. We also have 40% of our land that is in agriculture in California. So here's just a few data points on the food that we're producing here in the state. We have $50 billion worth of ag production. I think what's really important though is in synergy to what we're producing as far as food, we're also, we also have we're working with nature through all of that. We're one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots, and of the 5,500 plant species that we have here in the state, 40% are endemic, which means they're planted nowhere else on Earth. So agriculture and our natural lands are very much working together side by side. And so I think that's a really key part of what we're working on. Ken talked about our climate strategy in the state. So we have a carbon neutrality goal of by 2050. As you can see here on the left-hand side, this is where our emissions are from 2018. You'll see that agriculture is 8% of our emissions. That is direct agriculture on the land. Of course, we also don't just produce food, we also move it through the food system. So transportation and industrial and electrical would all, be part of what we're producing as well and generating in emissions. To achieve carbon neutrality, you'll see here on the right a visual of the sources and the sinks. And Ken talked about the wildfires that we've had recently, but we certainly have had wildfires throughout our history, but some really large fires in the past 10 years. And so you'll see that our natural and working lands here are actually part of a sink, that we are releasing a lot of emissions through forest fires and otherwise. On the other hand, and the other balance of the scale is, of course, carbon sequestration and the opportunities for the sinks. And so you'll see healthy soils there as a key part of the sinks. You'll also see, of course, forests as part of our sinks as well. So for healthy soils, there's many benefits. We, of course, are talking here a lot about our climate solutions. So soil contains 3 times as much carbon as all plants and animals on Earth. So I think that's just a really important part when we're thinking about the soils. The opportunity for soils to sequester carbon is immense. But not in a dry state like California, where we are unfortunately, especially having a dry winter this year, in the past year as well. Water savings, of course, public health and air quality, and then of course producing food are key parts. Biodiversity is another big part of healthy soils that I don't have here on this slide, but actually the biodiversity in the soil is actually 25% of the world's biodiversity throughout the world, not just in California, but throughout the world. The work that we're doing in California on Healthy Soils Initiative, and this is a really key thing for me, is that we have technical assistance, we have financial assistance, but we also have to marry policy and in this whole government approach to policy. Our work needs to be in partnership with many different players, whether that is our university players, our nonprofit players, of course, our farmers and ranchers, and the state government and many other entities. And it needs to be integrated and farmer focused. And of course, I'd be remiss in saying that our partnerships actually globally are key as well. Here's just a couple data points on what we've invested so far in the state of California on our Healthy Soils program. So we've invested close to $50 million at this point in our Healthy Soils program. These are direct farmer incentives for healthy soils practices. In fact, we funded 580. We also, it's really important that we don't just fund the incentives of practicing things like planting cover crops or planting a hedgerow or putting compost on the ground, but also those demonstration of the projects, because we know that some farmers are still looking at and interested in trying to explore what that might be. And so demonstrating how it could work in one system so that other farmers can come and visit and do a field day and learn about those practices is also very important. So those are a few of the data points on our Healthy Soils program. Technical assistance is one of those things that we've learned is absolutely important. Incentivizing practice implementation on the ground is important. Voluntary practices are important, but we also have to have what we call our boots on the ground technical assistance provider, people who are working day in and day out in the field, in the soil, exploring what different practices make sense and really problem solving with the farmer and rancher how to implement those. So technical assistance is a key part of what we do. I'd say it's that 1/3 of the leg, and then also our policy. We've heard a lot at the national level about the whole of government approach, and that is really what the policy for healthy soils is all about too. As you'll see here, there's lots of different state agencies at the state of California that interact with agriculture, that interact with all these really important resources that we touch on, whether that is pest management or water resources or biological resources or climate resources. And so there's this interplay that is really important, but also, we can kind of also get in the way of each other sometimes in our work. And so coordinating together, busting those silos with state government and really working together to identify and to promote soil health practices throughout the state is a key part of what we do in our Healthy Soils initiative. So again, aligning our agency efforts, leveraging our resources, and educating our constituents are part of this Healthy Soils initiative. I'm going to end on a very brief last point, which is we don't do this alone at the government level. Partnerships are really key. The supply chain as a key element of the partnership is really important. So consumers, buyers, investors are really can help us and partner with us, and we have been partnering with them in our work as well. So government is one cog of the wheel or one piece of the puzzle, as I have described here, but it all is all of us working together to solve these really important issues. So that's a snapshot of what we're doing in California, and I'll pass it back to you, Ashley.
Thank you so much. And that partnership is a perfect segue, because I think it's really important to note that, you know, the work that we're doing at the Institute is fully in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, both here in the US and in China. And so obviously we owe a lot to TNC China for helping us bring together this webinar today, and also just helping us get products out. TNC in California produced a really neat story map for where interventions in natural and working lands could land on the landscapes in California. And so really that partnership with academia, government, nonprofits is all critical to actually being successful. So along those lines, actually, I have a question for both of you that is about the hallmarks of successful nature-based solutions. So what are the indicators of the types of policies or the types of practices that are most readily accepted? You know, what have you learned in your years of implementing this type of work that makes it feasible to adopt these policies or adopt these actions so that we can share some of those best practices with others interested in it? So Jenny, you're still big on my screen, so I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Dr. Huang afterwards.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about technical assistance. When we first launched our Healthy Soils program, we funded in direct farmer incentives, and we also funded what we call demonstration projects, and those are really key. So those are really projects on the ground that are often partnership focused. So there's a farmer who is the host of those, what we call demonstrating, but they're working with our University of California system. They're working with nonprofits. They're working with the resource conservation districts. Really, there is, as we like to say in farming, there's no textbook system of implementing any practice, and definitely healthy soils practices or other nature-based solution practices that could be integrated pest management or otherwise. And so those partnerships throughout the system and at the local level, really working with the farmer, experimenting are really important. So demonstration and proof of outcome is key. And then being able to bring other farmers and ranchers who are interested, who are curious, and have that basically almost have a grassroots coalition growing of farmers and ranchers into that region is really important in really scaling up and what we've learned. And so we've actually, as we've gone through the years with our Healthy Soils program and many of our programs, is invested even more in technical assistance, even more in those demonstrations, because we see the ability for scale up so much more powerful through those demonstration projects.
That's excellent. And Dr. Wang, any reflections on that as well?
Okay, in my point of view, the hallmarks of the successful NBS, firstly, I think is stability, sustainability, or stability. So the intervention of NBS for the demonstration must be sustainable and also affordable. Sustainable means its function, its benefit is sustainable, and also the mechanisms, for example, platform established during the intervention. For example, in Beijing, we established platform among governments, industry, NGOs, and citizens. This platform must be sustainable, stable. And also another indicator, I think, is must be affordable economically. So because from intervention at the first and very initial stage, the government will pay almost all budget for that. But for the sustainability, so this economically sustainability is also extremely important. and also citizen participation and satisfaction of the citizens, I think is also a hallmark of the intervention successful.
That's great, thank you. And just a follow-up question to both of you. How do you communicate to interested people that you are meeting those goals, that people are involved, that you're showing success? For example, how do you communicate the rise in bird species or the uptake of these sorts of pilot projects? How do you publicize that, I guess?
Well, can I say, publicity is always a priority for successful of NBS. And how to, I think we need a strong scientific support. Scientific support provide us data, convincible data, and also we could use this data and the results to talk to the people who are interested in it. And normally I first talk with the decision maker and my counterparts about what is the NBS and well, what is the benefit of that, what we can do. And to help, and also in the meantime, I will talk with these people. It will help us, help me and help your work. You will do a much better work with the intervention of NBS. And also involvement of NGOs and the citizens is very important. I will use all public events or platform to publicize the benefits of NBS to all people, about benefit to their life, benefit to how our resilience of our city, and benefit for our next generation. So I think this also we could use the platform for media people, for newspapers, and also internet, and all this public platform to publicize of this concept and its benefits. So help the whole society to reach consensus.
That's great, thank you. How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, I think in thinking about some of our partners who do a really excellent job talking about the work that they do, the rice industry in California has done a very excellent job. Just as you talked about in Beijing, collecting the data, getting that scientific information, and then being able to turn around and use that data in partnership, of course, with nonprofits and the NGO community in really sharing what's done. And so the successes in the rice fields in California are pretty remarkable. They've been able to provide habitat for 230 species of wildlife. And then, of course, nourishment for millions and millions of birds through the Pacific flyaway each year. And so those kinds of data points, and then how they talk about it, and the story that is told about how we can grow food, and we can grow food for habitat, for food for people, and food for habitat, and then also provide land for habitat, and this beautiful interplay. I think they've done a really great job about talking about that.
That's great. I love hearing these numbers. As a lifelong advocate for nature-based solutions, it's so wonderful to hear such good stories. And now I can also help project that. So use me to publicize too. So another question for both of you is just, what are your thoughts on how the actions taken in Beijing or in California can influence other actions at the subnational level or at the national level? How could the work that you've done so far really influence that up the chain? And either one of you jump in. It looks like Dr. Wang was about to speak.
Okay, and so as the Beijing is capital of China, it is scaling up from Beijing level to national level. Comparatively, is much easier in Beijing. And normally, what we can do is first is do research. We need a strong scientific team, science team to help us, to provide me a strong, convincible research data. And also, secondly, we do a demonstration. And with demonstration of NBS intervention, and with the successful of the intervention, we got a local law or local standards. So since we stay in Beijing, we could invite decision makers at the national level to visit our sites, to talk with them easily, and to help them to get a further understanding about the success of the intervention. And also, we could help them based on our local regulation or the standards. We could scale up to improve existing national standards or national law. So gradually and with a fully more and more fully understand of these decision makers at national level, with consensus of our society. So this successful model or successful experience could gradually go from regional level to national level. This is what we have done and what we will do.
That's great. And I'm sure Jenny can comment on the importance of being in Sacramento, the capital of California, too. So you both share that in common. But go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we're doing in California and what the nation is really looking at doing right now are in a lot of harmony. And so there's a really great opportunity for us in California to, as you talked about, we always like to host, field visits and really for us in agriculture, get into the ground and hear and learn what's going on in different industries. I think as we think about scaling up around the country, really in agriculture, there's a lot of different agricultural systems. There's a lot of different climates, and recognizing and being mindful of that, some areas have a lot of what we call specialty crops, and things like fruits and nuts and vegetables. And others are growing a lot of commodity crops. But then there's also, of course, the dynamic of what that climate looks like. But there are some key things that we can all really focus on in those different dynamics. Things like cover crops is a big one. And the USDA Economic Research Service recently came out with a report that found that the implementation of cover crops is really increasing across the nation. And a lot of that has to do with many different commodity organizations really working with their growers to identify what are the best practices, what are some of the solutions, how can we implement and plant cover crops, usually in the winter, in our operations. And so we saw a 50% increase from 2012 to 2017 of cover crops around the country. And over 30% of those cover crops will really receive financial assistance. So we also know financial assistance is a key part. So those, I think, are some really big things is looking at what has been successful, finding out why those have been successful, and then adopting and bringing that and scaling that to a larger level.
That's great. And we're really lucky that we have a forestry expert here and an ag expert here. And I'm just interested in what you both think about opportunities in other ecosystems. Obviously, forestry and ag are probably the largest in terms of land holdings across the world. But what have you heard from other colleagues about interesting opportunities in other ecosystems, potentially where forestry meets other types or ag meets other types of ecosystems too?
Well, also in addition to forestry and agriculture, wetlands and also play a very important role in combating climate change. So I think the wetland could be more and more important for combating climate change. And agriculture and also in Beijing, I also want to say that also still very important. So what we call it, so our priority for next stage, what we call it agroforestry, is also will be important. So we need collaboration between forestry sector and the agriculture sector to work together to develop the good model for sustainable development. Actually, I also one thing I also want to mention that successful scaling up from regional level to national level, we also need NGO support. We need a platform for NGOs and also ordinary citizens to participate in the whole process. So, for example, we had a successful collaboration with TNC. We would like to continue our collaboration with these NGOs.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, my mind went to wetlands too, but I think in California, we're definitely faced with some, big forestry challenges, big fire challenges in the state. And as I think about that interplay and the grassland and the shrubland intersection and forestry and the opportunity there for us to really integrate things like prescribed grazing, careful grazing, or other practices where we can reduce the grasses and help mitigate some of the potential challenges for wildfire in a very safe way, of course, I think is another really key place where we can really look at that wildland agricultural interplace.
Yeah, those are all great ideas. I like that. And along those lines, we do have obviously academics on the line today, and you both mentioned research. So just, do you have specific interests or in terms of what additional research and education would be helpful to undertake or expand the use of nature-based solutions in national climate plans or even at the subnational level? So if you could touch more on the research you've referenced, any specific questions you have or specific educational opportunities you would recommend for our partners on the phone and on the Zoom to pursue.
Well, of course, we have a strong need for involvement of this research institutes, academies, and experts. And also, I think, for example, we could do research on policy of eco compensation. As I mentioned before, and in Beijing, we already had our eco compensation system. Of course, we need new challenges. We need to be improved. Also, we have compensation schemes from Beijing to neighboring provinces. Or this policy, I think we need experts to help us do research. This is the first one. Secondly, I think we have large area of forest. As in terms of area, we are satisfied with it. But in terms of quality of the forest, we are unhappy with it. So how to improve a low quality forests to increase the carbon sequestration, and in the meantime, that could improve the function like water source protection and biodiversity. So this is a kind of balancing point. We need help, expert to help us. And thirdly, I think the nature education. We need a whole society, citizens, 20 million citizens in Beijing. We need them to join us. And nature education is extremely important. As I mentioned, we have a stronger and stronger demand. So this kind of research, also we need help. And we welcome all scientists, academies, domestically or internationally, or including Berkeley University, to join us, to work together with us.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly nature education is so important. And we often in the ag world talk about food and ag education too, and all of those different pieces that we're progressively more removed from farming operations, and how do we really integrate that into what we're learning and what we're experiencing. I would say that research is absolutely key. I mean, we have what we call the land grant universities here in the United States are a really big part of the work and the learning that is happening every year on in agriculture and on the land, and forestry as well. So that is absolutely key, and it's an integral part to it. When I talked about our Healthy Soils program, we have numbers and we have quantification of the carbon sequestration of different practices because of those partnerships with research institutions. And I think that's a really key thing. We, through some of our demonstration projects, also fund research. And a lot of that is to validate those numbers, constantly fine tune. We are working in natural systems. And I think that an important thing is that we always want to learn, we always want to get better, but we cannot let perfection get in the way of good work. And we know the work that we're doing is good work. And so kind of recognizing that we're on this path for constant learning, and research is a key part to doing that. But we do know a fair amount of just, the incredible resources that both, urban forestry as well as, healthy soils provide for so many reasons, including carbon.
Well said, Jenny. That's very accurate. I think we've all worked hard to keep concurrent projects going on the ground while research is underway. We don't want to wait for research to keep moving in the right direction with greater magnitude. So that's a really good point. I'm sure some people are wondering, how do we pay for all of this? And so, this is, I think we don't always monetize the benefits we get from natural and working lands, from trees, from farms. We obviously pay for the food on our table, but that doesn't always cover all of the benefits we get from healthy agricultural lands and healthy forests. And so I'm just wondering your ideas on how we could actually increase the types of maybe payments for ecosystem services, or the types of payments that can go towards natural and working lands or nature-based solutions to climate change. So I have this question and one more, and I'm also just prompting folks to throw in your questions because we just have a little time left. So I'll leave that question there on the pay question. And if we have time, I'll throw in one more.
Yeah, I think, certainly at the federal government, we have funding. At the state government, we have funding, but we do so much at the government level. But as you alluded to, Ashley, the payment for ecosystem services, there's a lot of the food supply chain, and actually the fiber supply chain as well, is really looking at how do we start to not just pay for the edible or the wearable product, but also, how it's being grown as well. So there's a lot of companies that are really in this space looking at ways that they can compensate their producers in the supply chain for doing that. And I think that makes the world of difference. Growers know that they're not just producing food and fiber, they're also producing and, working a land that will hopefully be passed from generation to generation. And so being able to be compensated for that is a key part of it.
Well, our experience in China, in Beijing, the payments mainly from Beijing governments and also central governments. So strong financial support, the big cake from our budget is always important. And also we think the promote industry people to join ecological restoration also is very important. And we have in China, we have very famous saying that mountain and river green are the mountains of silver and gold. So the green industry also is very important, and we have a more and more strong demands from citizens. I think this is a good help to funding nature-based solution.
That's great, thank you. So one final question, and this is just this, this idea that our lives are on Zoom these days. At least in California, we're really still stuck on Zoom. And so there's less of an opportunity to share best practices with people across the world, with doing a lot of field-based visits. What recommendations would you have to get the word out a little bit more on the importance of nature-based solutions and the urgency of including them in climate plans? What messages would you send to other jurisdictions who are interested in doing this kind of work? How would you encourage them to jump in and get started?
Well, I think we need a collaboration, international collaboration to combat climate change. And we need a collaboration to share our experience and your experience. Also, we need a platform to learn lessons from us and also learn lessons from all over the world, and to reduce the carbon emission and to live a much greener platform.
You know, Ashley, I think there's actually a lot of incredible opportunity that we've tapped into as we've embraced technology even more to be able to have these conversations more frequently, rather than a lot of, travel is wonderful, and there's nothing that beats, actually seeing and feeling a place and being with people. But we've been able to really open up our doors a lot more through things like Zoom platform, things like being able to do webinars. We've learned, even prior to the pandemic, we have been launching these climate smart agricultural field studies where we've traveled to other countries and learned. And through those, we've actually now been able to host webinars, learn from Denmark about the great work that they're doing on manure management, for instance, learn from other countries about what they're doing, and think about how we can take those learnings and that great work and bring it back to our industry here in California. So there's actually a lot of opportunity through this technology to be able to learn, and then also to share those learnings as well.
That's excellent. I'm really glad to hear that. Well, I just really want to thank you both, and thanks to Ken too for sharing your expertise with us today. And I'm walking away from this discussion understanding that there's so many opportunities to increase partnerships, to share best practices, that this kind of outreach and dialogue is critical for figuring out how we can measure our success and share it across different jurisdictions. And I feel, as Ken said, pretty optimistic that we're moving in the right direction, and also energized to know that, the more research, the more partnerships, and the more collaboration we can bring to the table, the better outcomes we'll see for all of our people. And as Dr. Wong said, for the next generations to come. So thank you so much. A big jazz hands from my son's first grade class, round of applause to all of you. And thank you to Toy for organizing this for us, to TNC China and California for partnering with us, and to the Institute for supporting this dialogue series. We have multiple other opportunities to engage on these webinars. We have several coming up. You can see here, March 18th and 24th. We have a few more webinars coming up for you to learn some more with us. We hope that all of you on this webinar will join us, and we'll stay in touch as we have ideas planned out through the summer. So lots of chances to stay in touch even when we can't actually sit next to one another. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day in China. Have a good evening, everyone in the US. And we look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks.